big, big, big news came down in the NFL today. There's a lot of new rules the NFL is instituting this year. Let's start with maybe some of the minor ones that are coming into play. And those I think more have to tend to do with replay that I a little bit think it could work and it could not work. One of them is supposedly the league is going to be able to review potential snaps that should have not occurred or should occur due to delay of game violations, which I think is very interesting because we have always been taught that in the NFL, it's not when the clock hits zero. It's when the clock hits zero, the referee is supposed to look at the ball. And then if the ball has not been snapped, then you throw the delay of game flag, which again is a -1 or a -2, essentially on the play clock. I don't know if this is trying to eliminate that gray area or if this is more so that time where it's 3, 4, 5 seconds have expired off the play clock and they're trying to clean that up. But I think it could be a very interesting change if this turns into what the MLB pitch clock is, which is it hits zero, penalty.
Yeah. I feel like quarterbacks tend to get the ball off before the clock hits zero anyway, so I don't see this as being like a big change.
Well, it's not the quarterback. It's more of a center issue. It is center and quarterback.
Yeah.
But it's more of a center issue when it comes, and it's more of a road issue, obviously. Is the quarterback ready? Can you hear the cadence? All that stuff. The other two things that I thought was interesting is they have pretty much said that roughing the passer and some of those borderline bang calls can be reviewed in replay. And this is my fear on it is the NFL going to try to eliminate that gray area? And if you are we going to be able to call roughing the passer by the letter of the law? Because I still don't understand body weight. I haven't understood it since they instituted it. I don't understand what a 300-pound defensive lineman is supposed to do. There's sometimes where they even just shove the quarterback, and that's been called roughing the passer. What I hope this will do is the replay official was able to look at a play, and if a quarterback gets hit in the head or in the face, they're able to immediately tell and throw the flag for roughing the passer. I hope it also allows them to take a look at those bang ones where they do call roughing the passer, where the defensive player has taken maybe 1.5 steps and not a full 2 steps, where it's really bang, and sometimes it's called because we know that the defensive lineman gets about 2 steps before they are flagged. That's what I hope this rule eliminates, but I think it could open up a can of worms.
Honestly, like with how the roughing the passer penalty is called now these days, I'm just like, what do you want the defender to do? Like, make the quarterback's bed and lie them in it? Like, give them a pillow and gently place them down? Like, it seemed like even if the defender just breathed on the quarterback, they got called for roughing the passer. And
it also depended on the referee crew. Some were more lenient than others, which is maybe what this is trying to take away. Now, there is a lot of controversy. I know you want to talk about this, but I'm going to give my statement first because it might surprise you on the hip drop tackle. Here's my take on it. I actually don't think a hip drop penalty will be called at all this season.
Oh, I do.
I think that it will be a fine. I don't think it will be a flag, even though it's been a 15-yard penalty, because all the NFL reporters, from Adam Schefter to Tom Pelissero to Ian Rappaport, have all said that officials, and remind you, NFL officials are not full-time employees, and for those of you that don't know how the NFL officials work, officials actually go to officiating class every single week. They are graded during the season on non-calls they should have made and calls that were made that should not have been made. They are graded every single week. They also are taking classes throughout the offseason. But these officials have not been trained yet, and neither has the audience, on what exactly a hip drop tackle is. It's not as clear as a horse collar tackle, obviously. We're grabbing by the neck. It is more of a reach point of trying to pull a defender on the offense side down. And I thought Tom Pelissero made a great point when he said that an NFL coach had told him specifically that he thought this rule was only instituted so that defensive coaches are not teaching the players how to do the hip drop tackle because it could force injuries. And we all know about the bounty gate and all that scandal with Greg Williams years ago, trying to get rid of some of those dirty plays out of the game. And this coach specifically said that he knows some defensive coordinators that have taught this technique to his defenses. So that's where I think the rule comes in. I don't think it's going to be a big of a deal as people think. I could be completely wrong on it, but that's sort of my take on the hip drop tackle.
So they don't want defenders to hit offensive players, up high near the head or in the neck area. Now they're saying, no, you can't hit players below the waist. Where are defenders supposed to tackle? I feel like the NFL, I understand that it stands for National Football League, but I feel like it's slowly becoming the no fun league. What's next? It's going to become the flag football league instead? Like, I don't get it. Like, the defense needs an opportunity to, play defense.
The weird thing about all these rules is it's going to be a big deal in weeks 1, 2, 3, and the preseason. There's going to be calls and we're all going to flip out over it. But and I know, when it gets to the real football post-Thanksgiving, all of these what-if scenarios we talk about, they are almost completely forgotten about because the officials put the flag in their pocket and they let the players play.
Tell that to the 2018 New Orleans Saints.
Well, again,
I didn't see the pass interference. I didn't see it.
Well, yeah, it should have been pass interference, and no, it was not reviewable at that time, which, by the way, I completely understand. It's why roughing the passer,
complete and total bullshit.
It's why roughing the passer is not challengeable. It's a subjective call. I've always said, if you're going to make flags challengeable, you got to make every flag challengeable. Holding, roughing the passer, illegal contact, etc., etc. Why do we have referees? That's sort of my take on it. Officials are going to make mistakes, and contrary to what people think, the referees keep score. They're definitely biased. No, they're not. They don't care. They're trying to do the best job they can. And I challenge you, if you were an official on a real field in real time, I understand they make calls, and some of the calls are BS, and we come on here and scream and yell like we should, but it's challenging to officiate in real time. Basketball the most by far, but football is pretty close up there.
Yes, but if the referees are throwing flags against one team more than another, that's when you get those comments on social media.
Well,
like, how much did the Packers pay the refs? Or how much did the
you know what I would tell the Packers? Stop holding. Stop doing this. Stop committing penalties. Because when you look at a game in totality, very, very, very rarely is it decided by one officiating call. And I've always said this, both teams get breaks on every single play.
Wasn't your Super Bowl kind of decided on one holding call, though?
Listen, it was, and I've acknowledged it.
There you go.
And I talked about how it was a bad call, but haven't I talked about how we need to move on from the bad call? Yes, I have, on this very show.
Yeah, you have talked about it, but you just made my point, because that Super Bowl was decided on that call.
Most of the outcome was decided, but at the same time, if we could have got Kansas City off the field, maybe we don't even get to that point. So,
okay,
with that, we got to go to the not only the new onside kick rule, but the new kickoff rule, which is of course the XFL kickoff. What's your take on this new rule?
Okay, first of all, the XFL is no longer a thing. It's combined.
Well, now it is the UFL, but it was the kickoff used in the XFL.
Right. Speaking of the UFL season is kicking off this weekend.
It is.
We got Arlington taking on Birmingham, the last two champions from their respective leagues. So that should be an interesting game. It's very interesting timing for the UFL to kick off, but we can get to that at a later time. In terms of the new kickoff rule or format, I should say, it's interesting because I think it'll bring some of that excitement back, because most of the time kickoffs just resulted in, player takes a knee or it goes out of the end zone for a touchback, and now we go to commercial. So now you're going to start to see more returns, I think. And the NFL, they're trying to get rid of those high-speed collisions, and I feel like they're trying to save face by saying, oh, yeah, we actually do care about player safety, which I don't believe they do. I really don't. But that's my personal opinion. I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me on that. But it'll add intrigue to it. I don't like that we got rid of the surprise onside kick rule, because Pat McAfee was great at that. That's what he became known for in the NFL.
It is, but how many times in the last few years have we seen it? Once. The only time that I remember seeing it was the Dallas-Atlanta game. I don't know if you remember, it was like 2-3 years ago when Dallas pulled it off. It's very rare. It is more likely you do it in Madden than in a real football game. I'll say that.
The most famous onside kick, I would say, was when the Saints did it to open the second half of Super Bowl 44.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Saints Colts. But, okay, here's my thought on the actual kickoff. I do like the fact that it's going to create more returns. You mentioned it. We know the best few years, ever since the NFL put the touchback at the 25-yard line, kickoffs have been basically non-existent. But I do think it's going to be very interesting that in these zones, if you will, if the ball is kicked out of the back of the end zone, from my understanding, the receiving team is going to get the ball at their own 35-yard line. That is a huge difference in field position. And I actually think it could be a disadvantage for a team like the Ravens that have a Justin Tucker, or a team like Vegas that has Daniel Carlson, that have these big leg kickers. They may be forced to sort of put the ball on the ground or not kick it as hard as they usually could, to make sure that it lands, in between the 20-yard line and the end zone. Because if it's a touchback in the end zone, the ball would come out to the 20-yard line. If it's out of the end zone, it would go to the 35-yard line. And I do think that this, with both sides blocking obviously 5 yards away from each other, I think it could create more returns. I think in that regard, it could be harder to actually take the kick all the way back, because everybody is so close to each other. Once you get perfect blocking, you form a wall and everybody does their job. I think you could see, as many kickoff returns, with not as many, but I think more kickoff, or I should say about the same kickoff return touchdowns, but more kickoff returns in general, I think is good. For the onside kick, the fact that there's going to be, an advantage for the kicking team where they have 6 on one side and 4 on the other side, I do think that it could help with onside recovery. But to be honest, I don't know. I don't think the XFL did this version of the onside kick. I think this one was completely new, designed by the special team coordinators. So I don't know if it's going to help with recovery to the onside kicks. This is my take on the onside kick, and I know you might disagree with me on it because you said you lose the luster of the surprise onside kick. But I actually would want the onside kick to be completely removed. And my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, have proposed this now for the last 5 years. And I actually really like it unbiasedly, and I don't know why it hasn't been picked up as much, which is, instead of an onside kick, the team that is kicking off would bring their offense back out on the field, and you would have a 4th and 15 from your own 35-yard line. And if
I
you
think
convert,
it was 4th and 20, actually.
or 4th and 20, 4th and 15, it'd be a long 4th down. It wouldn't be impossible, but it would be hard. And if you get this 4th down, you would continue. And obviously, if you didn't, the offense would take over the other team from that spot. I really like that alternative. I think it'd bring out very much creativity in offensive coordinators. And I think it'd be interesting and more fascinating to see, because I don't know how many more onside kicks will be recovered by this new law.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, but I don't know how many teams would actually go for that. Because the reason teams go for an onside kick is they need to get an extra possession. Let's say it's 16-13 in the late stages of the 4th quarter. I know that's a really low-scoring NFL game, and fans would be like, I need to see more scoring. It needs to be 38-35, whatever. But you get my point, though. It's in that position, I would rather try for the onside kick than go for a 4th and 20, which is, as you said, highly unlikely.
Well, I disagree, because I think it's more likely you convert that than get at least under the old rules, it was more likely to get a 4th and 20 than get an onside kick. What was the recovery rate last year? 2%?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't see many teams really go for an onside.
That's what I'm saying, because under the old rules, and they did it for player safety, which I never understood, because I didn't get how, though all the special teams said that was the most dangerous play in football. It never looked that dangerous to me, but what do I know? I'm not a football coach. That was the most dangerous play in football, and when they got rid of the running start for the kicking team, unless you're playing Madden, where they instituted the new way that you can do the onside kick this year with the high kick and the low kick and giving yourself a better percentage, the onside kick was pointless. I mean, if you were down 14 with 2 minutes left, instead of saying, okay, we can get a touchdown, we can get an onside kick, we may have a chance, you're like, we don't have a chance.
Yeah. I mean, there have been some notable onside kicks. We touched on one of them, ambush with the Saints in the Super Bowl. The Patriots used an onside kick to beat the Browns, I think, back in 2013, if I remember correctly. The Cowboys did it against the Falcons a couple years ago. So, but other than those, I can't really think of others.
Well, speaking of Dallas, an interesting development came up today with Ian Rappaport, who pretty much all but confirmed that Dak now in his last year of his contract, if you remember, that was the whole summer of 2019 was the discussion around how much is Dak worth? Is he going to get this contract? And here we are again about 5 years later, Dak on the last year of his deal, though it does sound like, unlike the last time, Jerry Jones will be willing to actually let Dak play out this contract, which I think is a very interesting decision, because the Cowboys roster, by Jerry Jones' own acknowledgement, is going to be less talented than a year ago. I thought last year when my Philadelphia Eagles melted down, and we talked about it, the wild card game, we both said there was a scenario where Green Bay could upset Dallas if everything went right for Green Bay, but they had to play a perfect game. They just beat the hell out of the Cowboys. Nobody expected them to be up 27-7 at halftime in that game. How does Dallas rebound with Dak in his second year in McCarthy's system? CeeDee Lamb contract is on the horizon. Micah Parsons' contract is on the horizon. This is a big decision for Dallas, who, by the way, has seemingly not prepared at all for the exit of Dak Prescott by the way they drafted, because they just let Will Greer go, who is now a Philadelphia Eagles third-string quarterback. And I believe the only backup currently on their roster is the former number 3 overall pick of the San Francisco 49ers, Trey Lance.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, the Cowboys are trying to ask Dak Prescott to take a pay cut.
Which, for the record, and I'm not just saying this as an Eagles fan, if I was a Cowboy fan, I would ask Dak to take a pay cut as well. I believe that in your first contract, I was all pro Dak. Get as much money as you can in your first contract. But after that, now it's about winning. And Brady is obviously the most famous example of this in football because Brady would play for pretty much in pennies on the dollar, even though he still did get paid. Tim Duncan in the NBA is probably the most famous because Tim Duncan played on almost nothing to keep the Spurs flexibility open. But we know
Mahomes is kind of doing the same thing in Kansas City.
he is, but he's still getting paid relatively to the salary cap, just not what Mahomes is worth. But he's still getting paid a big chunk.
Right, I get that, but it's still kind of the same thing of what you're discussing.
No, I agree. And listen, the problem is, and I don't know if you disagree with me on this, but so as much as an Eagles fan as I am, as much as I tell you how much I hate Dallas, I have a beat Dallas T-shirt. I circle the Cowboys all over my calendar.
Trust me, I hate the Cowboys almost as much as you do.
I have been, and you, I think, are surprised by how much pro Dallas I've actually been on this show since we launched on September 5th, 2023, because they are a big brand. They have been a very good football team for years. They just haven't gotten over that divisional round up because they're the Dallas Cowboys and their coach falls asleep at the wheel. But with the endorsements that Dak Prescott gets off the field, I think it would be fair if I'm Jerry and I go to Dak and I go, hey, listen, I know the salary cap's going up, Dak, but you are just not worth $60 million. Kirk Cousins just got $50 million. I know you're in the ballpark of Kirk Cousins, but we don't have the endorsement deals, or they don't have the endorsement deals in Atlanta that we do in Dallas. Would it be fair for you to take between 40 and 45 million, about what Daniel Jones is making right now with the Giants, which is unbelievable, by the way.
Which is why Saquon Barkley is a Philadelphia Eagle.
Precisely. Would it be fair for you to take that? And you say it like this because if you don't, you're losing CeeDee Lamb, because I don't think Dallas would be willing to give up Micah. I think Dallas would rather give up CeeDee than Micah or Dak. That's just me. Because you are in a position where you are one of the biggest brands, if not the biggest brand in all of sports. If you don't have a quarterback and you have no succession plan for said quarterback, you're going to be absolute garbage. I don't care how good of a roster you have. You will be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before they got Tom Brady. You'll be the Denver Broncos before they got Peyton Manning. Denver won a playoff game with Tim Tebow 10 years ago. They wouldn't win a playoff game with Tim Tebow today, the way the NFL is with how great of a quarterback it is. So, Dallas, listen, Dak's not worth $60 million, but you got to pay him because you don't have another option.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Dallas does have to pay Dak Prescott, but what happened to this all-in stuff? Like,
Jerry, he's very good at the draft, and I'm interested to see what direction Dallas goes in the draft. I'm curious, though. I will say this. It will be noteworthy if in the second, third, or fourth round where they found Rain Dakota Prescott out of Mississippi State, if Dallas takes a quarterback.
It would be. I don't see that happening, but I can understand. I don't see it happening, but I can understand why you would say that.
I'll say this. If they take a receiver, I also think it's noteworthy because would they be willing, as great as CeeDee Lamb is, does it show their contract installments with CeeDee Lamb, and they would rather pay Mike and Dak and not CeeDee Lamb?
I could see that, but here's my counter argument to that: is we've seen in the NFL generally, you don't just need a number 1 wide receiver; you need a number 2 wide receiver; you need a number 3 wide receiver. I know Kansas City has kind of bent the rules on that. But in general, like when Philadelphia won the Super Bowl back in 2017, they had a good 1-2 punch in Alshon Jeffrey, and I'm trying to remember their other wide
Well,
receiver.
Torrey Smith was a deep threat, and then Nelson Aguilar out of the slot had a huge breakout year, which he never really duplicated. Besides, he had a good year last year in Baltimore. But Zach Ertz was a big part of that team, and LeGarrette Blount, J.J. as well in the run game. I would say, I think you
But
need.
Alshon Jeffrey was your definitive number 1 wide receiver.
Yes, he was. But
And
I
then
would
you
say
had
this.
complimentary number 2 and
Yeah.
number 3 wide
No, I
receivers
think you need
behind him.
I think you need a great number one. I'll just say weapon, because whether it's tight end, receiver, because Kansas City has Kelsey, etc.
Like I said, Kansas City bent the rules.
Then you need complimentary, like a Rashid Rice, like a Gabe Davis, who I think is a very underrated number 2 as a wide receiver that just went to Jacksonville. You need complimentary people, like you're saying, to support that. And we've seen in the NFL receivers come in day one, and it's like go-to. They're pretty much men when they come out of the draft.
Like Jamar Chase in Cincinnati.
Like Justin Jefferson, and like I believe Marvin Harrison will be. We're going to talk about this when we get closer to the draft.
Don't forget Jalen Waddle.
Well, Jalen Waddle, yes, he is a number one. He'd be a number one on most teams. I think Devontae Smith would be a number one mostly on most teams. The Eagles did not have A.J. Brown as well. So there's a lot of examples. I personally think Dallas is going to end up paying Dak. I don't know what the money will be. My gut tells me their first-round pick this year will be an offensive lineman. I don't know why. It's what it tells me. I think that they're going to try to rebuild that O-line. They lost their center. They lost Tyron Smith at left tackle. They're going to move the other Smith to tackle, and then they're going to have a Holwood guard. They have like 3 undrafted players that are potential starters right now in their offensive line.
They also need to fill linebacker because Leighton Vander Esch retired.
You know what? They're going to have a new defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer. They signed Eric Kendricks. It was their one free agent signing. I think that's sufficient at linebacker, because you know how I feel about that position.
Yes, I do. But in terms of Dak, going back to that, when you look at the quarterbacks in the NFC, he's got to be there near the top. I mean, I would say Jalen Hurts is at 1.
You know what? This is going to surprise you. I'm actually going to push back on that.
Really?
I think Jared Goff right now
is number 1.
I think Jared Goff, at the end of last year, Jared Goff was the best quarterback in the NFC, and I think Jordan Love was number 2.
Wow. Okay. So you have Jared Goff at 1, Jordan Love at 2.
Then I think it would be probably Jalen 3.
Okay.
And then I think you have this Matthew Stafford, Dak, Kirk Cousins, sort of 4, 5, 6 all in there. And I will say this, I would not be surprised if Caleb Williams is even above that Dak, Kirk, Stafford tier. Some people think Stafford's the best quarterback in that conference. I don't. I think Stafford's lost a little bit. And I think that there are quarterbacks that are better than him. But you could certainly make the argument for Stafford over Dak and Cousins. I could see that. I think Caleb Williams may very quickly rise above that ladder.
So I like your top 3 of Goff, Love, and Hurts. I just have them in a slightly different order. Even though Jalen Hurts' play fell off a little bit at the end of last season, I would still have him at number 1 for now.
I said this is why I picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl last year, because going into last year, I thought undisputably Jalen Hurts was the best quarterback in the division or in the conference. I didn't think anybody was close. I thought Dak might have been the second best because I didn't know how well Goff was going to be. I thought Jordan Love was going to be a bust. And we all know what Kirk Cousins does. You know, he got hurt and all that. And we both don't believe in the guy in San Francisco. And I did not know how Stafford was going to recover from being injured with the Rams. by the end of the season, it completely flipped. Now, Jalen could take that mantle back this year if he has a very good MVP-like year again this year. It's not saying Jalen Hurts is bad. I think Jalen Hurts is great. I just think when you take into account the way Goff and Love played at the end of last year and then the way Hurts played at the end of last year, if Jordan Love continues to ascend, there is a reason why in the Vegas over-unders that came out, I don't know if you know this or not, the Lions, Eagles, and Packers and Dallas, they're all at 10.5.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying about Jalen Hurts' play at the end of the last season, but I just look at the offense that Philly has and the weapons around Jalen Hurts.
By the way, just a quick note on that. Saquon Barkley out of Nick Sirianni's own mouth today at the league meetings. I'm telling you guys, I've never seen this from a Philadelphia Eagles team. They're actually going to be using a running back this year.
So I like the pieces around Jalen Hurts a little bit more than what they have in Detroit. So that's why
I completely agree with you. I'm just saying based off play of last year.
No, I get, and I understand what you're saying. So I would go Jalen Hurts. I would go Jared Goff. Then I would go Jordan Love. So we agree on Jordan Love being at 3. And then I would actually put Matthew Stafford at 4.
Yeah. I can see that.
I think Dak Prescott belongs at 5. I'm actually going to say, based off of last season, Baker Mayfield is at 6.
I completely forgot about Baker, and you know what? Is this a hot take? Just slowly based off last year, Baker over Dak.
Ooh. See, this is why I wanted to bring up these quarterback rankings, which we're just basing off of our opinion and what we saw last season.
I think now I have said this year, I think Atlanta probably wins the division. I think Baker without Dave Canales will be good, but he won't be as good. And I think Tampa caught some breaks last year. I think Kirk Cousins is worth more wins to Atlanta than what Baker was worth to Tampa, from this year to next year. I think it's going to be very close. I'll have to see how the schedule plays out. But I think Baker will still have a very good year with those weapons in Tampa. And I think Dak is a quarterback that puts up a lot of stats, but people don't know this. Baker Mayfield has the same amount of playoff wins right now as Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, 2.
Interesting. I really don't think it's a hot take to put Baker Mayfield over Dak Prescott. The only reason I'm putting Dak over Baker for right now is because I kind of like what you were just saying. I want to see, was it just Baker caught lightning in a bottle, or can he come back and do it again?
By the way, for people that don't know, Dak, Kirk Cousins, and Baker Mayfield, look up their stats side by side. All 3 of them are the exact same quarterback.
And if you think about it, many times Dak's stats get overly inflated, I would say, because
especially in those early years like 2019, 2018. By the way, I always said this, and I know you're not an Ohio State fan, so you'll appreciate this take. I know we're going a little bit off the rails, but I always thought Ezekiel Elliott was the most overrated running back that I've seen in such a long time. I didn't think Zeke did anything for the last 3 years he was in Dallas. He had one great year. It was rookie year.
Yeah.
So, Dak inflated, I think, a lot of his stats. As the man that used to be on Undisputed with Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, used to say, garbage time stats. That's basically what they were with Dak. But
that's essentially what I was getting at. So thank you for leading me into that.
I'll let you finish up here, and then we do got to move on. We're running a little bit over.
But if you remember, the game between Dallas and Cleveland just a couple years ago, that game was basically over, and Dak inflated his stats through garbage time.
Yeah, I don't remember a ton of that 2020 season. That was the COVID year. That was the game where Odell ran around in circles and somehow found the end zone.
Yes, And he threw a touchdown, I believe, as well.